Yeah, thanks heaps for joining us, Ivan. Really excited
No
to have
problem.
you on. Definitely one of the icons of Australian dance music, with quite a lot under your belt.
Thank
To kick it off, did you want to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself for the people that might not know?
Yeah, well, I guess I started making. I initially started out wanting to be recording, and I was growing up just a guy who was interested in the sound of records. I liked records like everyone else does, but I was particularly interested in the sound of records. And so in the late '80s, when I was a young man, I started working in an actual recording studio. And then around that time, I started going to clubs, and pretty soon I discovered house music and techno, and then that whole kind of DIY sort of thing is what kicked it off. So I started. My first release was kind of mid '93, um, and throughout the '90s and into the early 2000s, I spent a lot of time making progressive house, darker sort of late night kind of underground stuff, breaks, then moved into sort of doing some electro stuff for a while. Started hanging out at One Love and kind of was working with Grant Smiley, doing some stuff with under the name of TV Rock for a bit. Some of you will know the tracks we had then, a couple of big hits in that time. Then I was
Monsters.
moving later in the 2000s. I was working with some people making some more kind of big room sort of stuff. I had a couple of big records with tracks like In My Mind and so on. And then in recent years, I'm back making more sort of deep house and deep melodic techno and doing a lot of production and mixing work for other people. So just co-production, pretty much anything people want.
Yeah,
If I feel like I can contribute to the project, then I'm in.
yeah. It's funny. We had Klaus on a couple of weeks ago, and he was heavily into the breaks as well. It seems like that was big in Australia. That was before my days, so I can't quite comment comment on that.
Yeah, no, it
And
was.
also with the big room, like I guess the styles have changed over the years. And now you're doing more of the deep house and that kind of stuff. Is that so? Is it now more of a passion project, and or more of you? Has your taste changed over the years?
Well, I grew up listening to melodic music, melodic synthesizer driven music. In the 80s in Australia, most of radio over here was mostly Australian rock. All my mates were listening to, Cold Chisel and Midnight Oil and bands like that. And I was kind of into it, but the stuff that really spoke to me was mostly European synth pop kind of groups like New Order and Depeche Mode. And so I've always had that melodic synthesizer driven thing. So when it comes to electronic music, when I started listening to DJs, I was particularly attracted to people like Sasha and John Digweed and Paul Oakenfold in the early days, um, and really devoted my time to just melodic house, I guess, for want of a better description. And so that's where my heart's been all the time. By 2003, 2004, it was kind of starting to get a bit old hat. And I started going to One Love and hanging out with John Corse and Grant Smiley and Kaz James and those guys. And it was just fun doing something a bit different. It was more housey. It was more jackin' kind of beats. And so I fell into that and loved it for a while. But then more recently, I've just been, I guess, going back to that sort of deeper, more soulful kind of stuff that I guess my heart's always been in that sort of genre. I'm a big fan of, Maceo Plex, Solomon, some of the deeper garage guys. I like listening to Jeff Mills and any DJs doing melodic techno and stuff. Anything that's got melodies. I'm not a big fan of tougher kind of music. It's more just melodic stuff.
I had a Jeff Mills 1994 mix getting me through my marathon run the other day. Was all this music introduced to you by someone, or did you just perchance kind of like discover this
Yeah,
and it was like a
yeah.
rabbit hole? Or
No, this guy said to me one night, we're going into the city to listen to some house music. And I misunderstood what he said. I thought we were going to somebody's house to listen to some music. And we ended up at the Melbourne Underground, which was a pretty cool club back in those days. It was down the bottom of King Street, where all the naughty places are now. The Melbourne Underground was hot at the time. And I remember going in the front door, and it was, 2 o'clock in the morning, lights were down, strobe going, smoke machine, and it was just like, what the hell is going on here? I was just hooked almost instantly. I never needed alcohol or drugs. I just loved it. I loved the beat, and everything just spoke to me, you know, right off the bat. So that's where it kind of started. It was just, I had a mate of mine who was, yeah, he was kind of into it, but I also was listening to a radio show. There was a radio show in the early days on Triple R. It was hosted by a guy called Steve Robbins, another guy called David Carboni, and in the later months, they had Richie, who went on to become Hardware and Stereosonic and stuff. Richie, those three guys used to play imports, and they used to play a lot of stuff that was hot off the press from the UK, some of the really underground techno. And it was, I mean, man, it to me at the time, growing up listening to mostly rock records, it just sounded like outer space, you know. It was really something else. And it just grabbed me straight away. I was like, that's it. I have to go and find more of this. So I started going to clubs, and pretty soon because back in those days, we used to go clubbing 5-6 nights a week.
Which is all what we'd love to be doing right now.
Yes.
We would be. Yeah, I guess Australia got a lot of those records later. We're a bit disconnected from the rest of the world. We're on an island, and we're not, you know, that European music probably came to us a lot later, or you would have had to have really dug deep to find it.
Well, yeah, we used to follow DJs around back in those days because they had records that we knew that the other guys didn't have. So there might be just one track that we wanted to hear. So we'd go and see a DJ just because they would play it. You know, back before the internet and stuff, it was a real sort of gentleman's club. You had to know people who knew people to get the records and stuff. I mean, we used to shop at Central Station, which was great, but there was also a few crew in Melbourne who were actually directly importing their own records. And so it was a different kind of scene back in those days, and a lot more underground. I mean, talk to people at work about, where'd you go on the weekend? You tell, I went to a rave. They'd be like, what's that? Where was that? What's that? I had no idea. House music, what's that all about? You know, like it was very much a sort of small group of us who were in the know. And it was getting your hands on hot records. Sometimes DJs would get a record, they put a sticker over the label so the other DJs couldn't figure out what it was. So they'd have it for a few months before anybody else worked out what it was.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to chat a little bit about, like, we put a status up, you said songwriting, production, mixing, and what kind of haircut you need to succeed in the business, which I thought kind of funny. I guess before I start rattling off any questions, is there any like specific things that you had in mind that you just wanted to share with us?
No, go for some questions. I'm sure that stuff will come from the questions you're asking. There's plenty to talk about, so you just shoot off.
I guess since the first record was out in 93 to 2020, what's changed in terms of like how you approach creating a record? Has it changed?
The workflow is completely different. I mean, back in those days, you had to have $20,000-$30,000 worth of gear. You needed to buy samplers. The samplers used to cost $4,000 or $5,000. You needed a couple of them to play back beats and stuff. And samplers used to hold 10 or 15 seconds worth of audio. So it was a completely different scene. And I guess from a workflow perspective, you had to know the gear. You had to learn. You couldn't just go and load up your latest preset or something. You had to kind of learn how to work the gear, how to get what you needed out of the equipment. You had to have a mixing board because, in my early days, I had, what did I have? I had a 32 channel Mackie mixing desk, and the 32 channels were just so I had enough channels to plug in all the synthesizers and stuff that I had. You'd have cables running across the room. There was no automation, so
wow.
if you wanted to adjust filters, you had to run across the room and just tweak things with your hands. And I can still remember doing a track one time with a Melbourne DJ, Phil Kay, an old friend of mine. And I can still remember we had to record the DAT. I reckon it was about 20, 25 times before we got all the filtering right and we were satisfied with the final take, sort of thing. So it was a different situation. It was more long term. Obviously, some of the old analog synths didn't even have memory, so you had to kind of finish the track before you could change the settings to work on another record.
Oh, wow.
So, the workflow was totally different, and it was a lot more effort. And, when I used to go to the city to do final mix downs in big studios, half the time I'd get in there and I'd forget a power supply for one of the synths. I'd have to go all the way back out to the suburbs to pick it up. And but today is great. I mean, everything's available in a laptop, in a computer. I mean, I'm working on a laptop here. I can do everything just in the
Do you
box.
have a mixing desk now, or
No,
much outboard gear, or is it just all sort
no,
of in the box?
not at the moment. I'm running on a, I've got a UAD Apollo down here.
Oh yeah.
I love. I'm actually thinking about buying some outboard gear, but I'm actually waiting till I build the studio that I'm about to build first, and then get the room right, and then see what kind of budget I've got left over after I do that. So,
And I guess everything's changed throughout isolation. How has that affected you? Like, obviously, you do quite a lot of mixing and you do a lot of work on other people's
yeah,
tracks. So I
yep.
guess you're still kind of business as usual, or?
Yeah, I am. I am. There are. Yeah, I've got a fair bit of stuff on at the moment. Most of what I'm doing is just helping take people's projects to an international releasable standard. So it varies a lot. In the last, say, month, for example, I've worked on 2 pop records, a couple of commercial house tracks. I've worked on 3 underground garage records. I've just finished an EDM mix down for a guy yesterday. Anything goes. I mean, in this, particularly with COVID and everything that's going on at the moment, you've just got to take the work as it comes, really. And
Yeah.
and for myself, I'm writing and producing some crossover house stuff, but a lot of what I'm doing is more the underground kind of deep house. But that's just for me. That's just to keep me from going insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there like plans behind that, or is that just an absolute passion project?
No, it's a bit of both. I'm working with the Journey guys, Tommy Evans
Oh,
and
yep.
so we've got a project that is we've got 4 tracks on the cooker at the moment. One's finished and 3 are kind of almost there. So I'm doing that with them. But yeah, some of it is just for me.
Yeah.
See what happens. If I get a release for it, then good. But it varies. Yeah.
And what kind of plugins are you using then? If it's in the box and you're doing kind of mixing and mastering, what are your go-to ones to get that kind of that sound? Because I guess the music you're making kind of has that. If it's that sort of journey deep kind of stuff, it's got that raw, nice.
Well, I've got a few.
I guess they love their analog gear, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I spent my life with analog gear, and
yeah.
To me, analog gear is still a better way to work. It's having knobs in front of you, making adjustments, particularly when you're working with things like, for example, a mini Moog, right? If I've used I bought the Yuhi Diva. Now that's a great,
love Diva
in the box. It's a mini Moog knockoff, and it's very good.
Yeah.
But when I had the Moog, because I had a Voyager for a while, which I sold and probably shouldn't have, but anyway, I had one. It was great because you just adjust the knobs. You get a different result every time because you're just tweaking things and kind of trying to come up with a sound that you haven't heard before. You know.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of advantages to that, and I think for me, that's probably the one aspect of the workflow that I loved was just having the switches and the knobs in front of me to just go filter or LFO or, to adjust things on the fly and get a result quickly. And I think once I've built my room, I'm gonna put some analog stuff back in. Not a lot, but I'll probably buy a couple of analog synths, I think.
Yeah. What plugins would you recommend then for some of the guys that are looking at doing
for the actual
getting to that next level of kind of like, I guess most people probably are like me, right? Where they're at the level where they like don't want to spend they don't want to buy analog mixing gear, but they want to get their mixes better, with plugins and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the first thing you got to do is the best. I mean, for me, the synths and stuff, most people know the good stuff. I mean, I bought the Native Instruments Complete. I think I got Complete 10. I'm probably due to upgrade actually, but it was a Complete 10. It wasn't the ultimate. It was just the standard version. You get like stacks of sounds, 300 gigabytes or something of various sounds so that's a good place to start for just your kind of general toolkit. Can't go wrong with it. The other stuff that I love in terms of sound creation, I'm a big fan of some of the Arturia stuff. I've also got the plug-in boutique, the new synth that they just came out, which is called the Niforium or something, which is just unbelievable. Sounds like genuine analog. It is so crazy.
Oh, we'll chuck a link for that. Those ones are in the description as well.
And there's probably a few others that I'll come back to in a minute. I use Logic. I produce on Logic, and that comes with 2 or 3 really good ones. Alchemy is one of the ones that's built into Logic now, which is really good. If you don't have that, there's a thing called Omnisphere, which does like pads and strings and other things. So yeah, most of the tools, I like the Diva, the UE Diva. There's a couple of really good kits. You can the best thing you can get with those is go and find really good preset packs and load them up, because there's some really awesome ones where some guys and girls and stuff have actually spent a lot of time programming some really good usable sounds in a particular genre. So if you're making deep house or something, you go look for some deep house kits. You'll find a lot of handy stuff. And then when it comes to mixing, I've just been all over the Acoustica stuff lately. The Acoustica audio plugins are just...
I just spent a ton of money on them, so that's great to hear.
Yeah, the good thing about those guys is they're doing deals all the time. They're always discounting stuff. You buy them during the Black Friday sales. That's
probably actually a good tip for anyone listening, is just put your email address into every single plugin site that sells plugins, and they will just hit you with sales. Never buy anything full price. Totally. You would get it on sale.
Totally. So I love the Sound Toys plugins. I got the whole set of those, and it was I remember that because I had them, then I lost my key, and I had to break into an old email address that I had, an old Hotmail account. I found the old details, which meant that I could then get an upgrade for a discounted price. So last year I bought the upgrade, and I used it for 1 week, and I kept thinking to myself, why the hell didn't I have these earlier? They were just, they are so good. The Sound Toy stuff, just for cleaning up vocals and creating tricks with the altar boy, the vocal pitching and other things, they are just amazing plugins. The UAD stuff, the Universal Audio stuff that I've got an Apollo down here. That's pretty good. A lot of people have asked me would I recommend them, and I say yeah, because you can hand off some of the DSP stuff to the Apollo. It's good for kind of, I guess, the Swiss Army knife type of EQing and the sort of stuff that's not necessarily... when I'm going for the big vibe and tone and professional international sounding mixes, I'm using a lot of the Acoustica stuff, but the UAD stuff has got some amazing plugins. So that's not a bad idea if you're looking for something. I love the... I'm trying to think now. I should actually load up my rig and tell you what I'm using. I'm using the... I've got a couple of soft tube EQs that are quite good. I was actually thinking about buying the console one, which is the little EQ panel and stuff that actually has a controller that allows you to kind of use it like a channel in a mixing board. But it only controls the soft tube plug. So I don't know if I'll go down that road yet, but I like their stuff. It's really good. There's quite a few other bits and pieces. For reverbs, I just got my hands on a thing called the Sonsig Rev A reverb, which is just getting stuff to sit in a mix. I've never seen anything that is so simple to use. But I also like the IK Multimedia. There's a set of reverbs called the Classic Studio Reverbs. And I've been using those for years. And the plate reverb on that, for doing like 80s drum sounds and big kind of rock snare sounds and stuff, nothing beats them. So that's also a good little... and then, of course, the Wave stuff. Waves have got a lot of handy plugins. I just look for stuff that's on sale. Whatever's on sale.
What do you go to if you had to pick two of the Acoustica audio ones?
I just bought the pink set, which is the API. They're not bad, very clean, fairly transparent. But my favorite is it's not navy. Is it navy? No, lime. The modern lime, which is the modern Neve AMEC stuff. For doing like basses and things like that, it just, man, you want to get a bass that sounds like it was done on a Neve console, you can get it with that thing. It's fantastic. And the other thing which I absolutely love which I just got is Erin. It's the mastering channel strip. I use a bit of that before I send my tracks to get mastered. So it's cooking really good.
Yeah, they cook your CPU as well.
Yeah.
So they're quite weird to use.
I'll give you a tip. When you use Erin, if you use an Erin, switch the meters off.
Yeah. And
your CPU load will go down heaps.
There you go. They're all...
There's a button to turn the meters off, switch that off, and your CPU load will drop off a bit.
We'll add all them. I'll check this on YouTube, and I'll have everything in the description as well. Sure. So we'll have all those plugins. Thanks for that. There's a couple of reverbs in there that I've never heard of that I'm really excited to check out now.
There's quite a few good ones. There's also the Valhalla stuff too. I don't know if you use that.
Yeah.
But that's Sonsig. mate, I tell you, it's got a high-low cut thing that you can just get the reverbs to sit somewhere where you need them to. They are just and it's very editable, but also has a very simple GUI, which is great.
Yeah, so you probably have an APRA split on more songs out of any other Australian producer. You've been part of a few duos and groups like obviously TV Rock, La Trick. I guess like a lot of people right now, especially maybe struggling with kind of writer's block, is working with other people. How you get a bit of extra inspiration, or how would you approach writer's block? And do you recommend working and collaborating with other people?
Well, as far as let's break that into two questions. As far as writer's block's concerned, you've got to know when to just go, you know what? I've been pushing the button on this for too long. It's not working. I'm going to put it aside and come back to it. I know that, for example, Duke Dumont, I saw an interview with him one time, and Duke Dumont said he would sketch out like one idea a day. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, different idea each day. And then on Friday, he'd go back over the 4 ideas and pick the best one and work on it and try to get it finished. And that was how his big record, Ocean Drive, got done. He had it sitting there. He was like, no, I'm not feeling it. And then one day he just loaded it up and went, yeah, you know what? I've got an idea for this. And he finished it. And it became obviously a massive record for him. So for writer's block, one of the hardest things for producers is working out when to go, this is not clicking. I'm not getting anywhere with this. Just put it aside. Start on something fresh and then come back to it. Give it a few days, come back to it. Sometimes you'll come back to something and go, you know what, it was garbage. I'm going to not bother. Or sometimes you'll come back to it with fresh ears and you'll have a great idea straight away. Then one of the other options is take your idea. If you've kind of hit a brick wall with it, then talk about a collab. But look for someone to collab with that you think is going to add some value to the table. I mean, I get asked a lot for collabs with people, and it's kind of like I'm looking for people who are doing stuff. I go, okay, what have you done? What's your history? Do I feel like there's going to be any value in it working with that person? Because sometimes it's just a random kid who says, hey, let's make a record. And I go, why? I don't know who you are. I don't know what you've done. If you haven't got any demos to play with, then I don't know what you're... But if you find someone that you are in synergy with, then yeah, if you're getting stuck on a record, hey, send it over to them. Say, look, I'm struggling with this track. Flick it over to your mate and say, well, maybe you want to have a crack with it,
Yeah. And is there apart from the Journey guys, is there more collaborations and stuff coming up for yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing a bit of stuff with, I work with Marcus Santoro on some deeper melodic, almost that kind of Anjona deep type music. We've got a couple of tracks we've finished with under that sort of sound. I also work with a lot with Luke Chable, who's a progressive house. He was quite.
You guys have worked together for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah. Me and Luke are on the same page musically. We like that sort of almost imagine like trance records, but at house music tempo. That's the kind of music we have a similar synergy in that sense. So I've worked with him on a lot of bits and pieces. But most of my stuff at the moment is not so much a collab. It's more just fixing up tracks for people. People give me their demos and say, look, it's 3/4 done. Can you just mix this and add a few bits and pieces to it and get it ready for release? So a lot of it it's collaborative, but it's not going to have my name on it, I suppose. So
yeah. Who would be have you got any like funny stories or favorite moments of some of the artists you've worked with in the past, or even like TV Rock tour moments or anything like just to...
Oh mate, there's
that you can tell us.
there's some hilarious stuff. There's stuff going wrong and stages falling over and drunk people falling off. Yeah, there's quite a few. I should put
stages falling over.
Some stage together. Oh yeah, we had a console fall over one time. There was one. We were. Well, yeah. I mean, we kind of, when you're on the road. I remember when we first had the hit with Flaunt It, and we were out on. We did a few live performances with Shawnee, and mate, he had girls offering him money, trying to, will you marry me, and all this kind of craziness and stuff. When you have a hit record, it's. Mate, your world turns on its head. It's not a good thing. For me, I hated it. Like, I just did not want to be successful. I just wanted to be the off-the-radar guy. I'm a very humble sort of person. That's who I am. So when we had this massive hit, next thing you know, we're playing in front of 30,000 people every other week. It's like, wow, how did we get here? I played.
Sounds terrible, mate.
Yeah, I know people would go, really, it's not that bad. But it's like some of the gigs we did, though, very commercial, and you go, you know, I can't really do what I want to do normally here. So you end up just selling yourself short, trying to kind of meet the expectations of the market. But we did some amazing shows. I mean, I played at a thing in LA called the Monster Massive. They had, I think, 90,000 people there.
Wow.
It was the main stage. They had 65,000 people. It was, I DJ'd alongside of, it was not Paul Van Dyke. It was Armin van Buuren, actually, it was. Jeez. And another a Scottish trance guy, John O'Callaghan, I think his name was. So the lady that was booking me in America, she said, I want you to come and play the show. There's going to be a few people there. And I got booked on the side stage. So I said, side stage, how many people? Maybe 1,000, 2,000. He goes, no, the side stage has got 18,000 people on it. I was like, that was the side stage. They had 90,000 people at this gig. It was just unbelievable. The main stage was bigger than anything I've ever seen.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm pretty low key. I don't have a lot of stories of stupidity because I'm kind of, you know, I'm not that sort of guy. I'm pretty kind of chill. I'm a bit bored, to be honest. Yeah.
Was it kind of like a natural progression to go from the big gigs, the big touring, and then just going into the more of that background kind of role that you're doing now, and a bit more of helping people kind of finish their tracks? Like, it sounds like that's what you kind of prefer to do.
Look, my favorite gigs, I had some amazing shows, and my favorite gigs have always been clubs where I can play for 4 or 5 hours and just take them on a journey. And that was the old school way we used to do things.
Yeah.
I like doing that. These days, everywhere you go, it's, hey man, you've got a long set tonight. It's an hour and 15 minutes. You're like, what? That's, you know.
I guess it's kind of like a nice sentiment for DJs now as well. Well, not right now, but in the last, say, year or two, if you're at that level where you're playing 4 or 5 hours in a club that you love, you know, you might be having more fun than if you made it.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. Because when you go to the bigger gigs too, some of the bigger festivals you're playing on a lineup with, especially when I had the hit with In My Mind, I got straight away, I was like, okay, this is a banging EDM guy, which is not really what I was, but we'd go to gigs and it was just a turf war. Everybody's trying to outdo each other, playing harder and louder and noisier and longer. And you've got like 45 minutes to impress the crowd. It's like, what? Just the other guy an hour and a half and I'll stay home, you know, like
speed dating.
Yeah. But going back to doing what I'm doing now, for me, the music and the production of music has always been the most important thing to me. When I started out in this game, all I wanted to do was produce. And I started DJing so I could earn. I figured if I can DJ 3 nights a week, I can earn enough money so I'll have the rest of the week free to make records. That's all I wanted to do was just produce songs. And I just wanted to make records that make people feel great. And so I have people coming up to me now that maybe they liked the record I did 20 years ago. Oh, that record got played at my wedding or something. That to me is more important. Somebody loving one of the tracks that I've done, that's more important than standing in front of 20,000 people and jumping around like a goose and throwing cakes at people and stuff. You know?
You're actually quite unique when I think about it, because you're probably one of the only producers I know that's been sampled rather than doing the sampling. I remember recently we had that little APRA meetup. I think it was.
Yeah.
And we were chatting about In My Mind and how the vocal was sampled. And I found that quite interesting, that story about how your publisher approached that, and you ended up getting, you know, it wasn't like they approached you and asked if they could use it. They did sample it and just put it out, right?
Yeah, they put it out, and then the European, because I think it was a track that was originally with Axwell on Axtone, and his label guys heard it, and they said, hang on a minute, that's not supposed to happen. So they contacted Smiley, my manager, and said, listen, do you know anything about this or something? And no, so then the guys sent me an email. The guys that were actually behind the project sent me an email. I think it might have been the record label that had released and said, are you guys okay if we do a deal for this? I said, yeah, let's make a deal. So my manager got in and cut us a really good deal, because the problem was they actually made a mistake, because they put it out and it started getting like big plays and big streaming numbers almost straight away. We all knew that it was going to be a massive record.
It was huge. It was number one in some countries.
We're going to stitch you guys up for more cash now. So he went in with... We got a good deal. I mean, it was not ridiculous, but there ended up being 6 or 7 people on the final version. But the Dynoro version of In My Mind has, it's like 1.5 billion streams when you add up to Spotify and YouTube and stuff. It's crazy. But I love that. I love that when people pick an old record that you've done and take a sample from it and go and make a new tune out of it, and then it becomes a massive hit, and you just
So
You know?
when you heard that someone sampled your tune, even though they did it illegally, it didn't upset you at all? Or you were just like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's just
No,
get a
I said, let's
splitter.
do a deal. Might make some money.
Yeah,
I didn't
cool.
like it when I first heard it. I was like, oh, this is actually, it was one of those records that I kind of went, yeah, okay, I can see a lot of people might like this maybe. The fans of the original hated it. They were like, nah, it's rubbish. But yeah, it worked really well. And it obviously connected in Europe because it was number one in about 15 countries. So,
Wow.
yeah, I actually found out, initially I found out through Andy Van from Vicious Recordings. He called me up one day and he goes, do you know your record's number one in Germany? And I said, what, on the club chart or something? He goes, no, on the pop chart. It's on Spotify, number one. I'm like, what? So I looked it up and I went, oh, cripes, that's going places. So it helped out my
Jesus.
publishing deal. My publishing deal last time was good. It's better
Yeah.
than, so yeah, I was happy with that. But that's what can happen.
How do you
If I can
find
give anybody, if I can just
yeah.
dispense a little bit of advice to everyone
Yeah.
watching at the moment, the best thing you can do for yourself is just make sure when you go to work with somebody on anything, just drop an email on them. This is what I think the splits should look like. We'll give ourselves 50% of whatever, and get them to agree with it in an email before you start, so you know what you're going to get, because you never know when you're going to come up with that one track that could become a hit, and you don't want to be on the receiving end of a deal because you didn't get that sort of stuff sorted out at the start. Even if it's just an email that says, yeah, I'm agreeing to this amount of money, it's something you've got in writing before you start.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's kind of how I'm surviving at the moment. I've built up such a catalogue of works where I've just, sometimes it's been just a bit of co-production, and I take a small cut of everything I work on. Might only be 5%, but on enough records over a longer period of time, all of a sudden your catalogue builds up, and I could be, even if I died tomorrow, my family's going to continue to take money from me forever, pretty much, as long as people are listening to music that I've been involved in.
I can vouch for that. You've done a bit of work mixing some of the Colour Castle stuff, so you're on a couple of them, so I can confirm.
I do, but that's how I operate with people. I don't charge much for my time. I say, give me a small cut of the record, and I won't charge too much for what I do, because a lot of people charge a lot of money for their time, and I think you can't do that, especially in the marketplace today. No one's got any money, so you've got to say, let's take a small amount of money. I'll take a small cut of the record as well. So if it becomes a hit somewhere, then I'm getting a little bit of action for it, And I think that's a good way to work. I
guess you'd be a little bit more invested in how the record sounds if you're getting a little bit of a split as well.
That's right. If you've got some skin in the game, you're going to do it. Hopefully, you're going to do a good job with it, and it might encourage you to spend a little bit more time on something. If you're getting paid peanuts, then you're probably not going to be, I'll just do it to that. That's good enough, and that's it.
And what about, like, for someone like myself? Like, I don't have a publisher. You obviously have a publisher. When in your career, and at what level would you advise an artist to sign a publishing deal, or if they're being approached by a publisher, what would you recommend in that sort of field? That's
a hard one, because a lot of people want a publishing deal because publishers usually pay you in advance. It's difficult because the ultimate time, the best time to sign a publishing deal is when you haven't got one, but you've got a hot record.
Yeah,
and everybody wants it. So it's tricky. I guess best thing I can tell people is wait until you've got a body of work, until you're getting some streaming, and you feel like you've got enough there that you can perhaps sell yourself to a publisher. But it's a difficult one. It's kind of a how long is a piece of string sort of question, because quite often if you've got something of value, then a publisher will come to you. They'll say, hey, listen, we know your streaming figures are good. The good thing about a publisher too, if they're any good, they'll help you to develop your sound. They'll help you to find money that you're owed in other places as well. I mean, most people can sign a publishing deal tomorrow. What I would say is, if you're going to sign a publishing deal early on and it's for not very much money, then don't sign for too long.
Yeah.
Sign for 12 months or a couple of years and say, right, I want to renegotiate.
Like a probation period or something.
Sign something so that if you have, because you might find yourself 2 years later with 2 or 3 hot records and your publisher's only got to give you $2,000. It's like, no, that's not going to.
So what would be the kind of like dangers, or like, I guess like there's different publishers at different levels, and some could be amazing and some could be kind of snakes or something. Like, how would you tell the difference? What are the kind of dangers?
Look at who they're working with. Look at who they're working with, what they've done. There are a lot of sharks in the industry, not so many. There's probably a few in the publishing game, but just look at who they're working with, And when you're discussing a publishing deal with them, ask them what they're going to do for you, because the publishers, I mean, they take a cut of your income. It's really kind of good if they're actually going to put a bit of effort into helping sell your music. If they're going to pitch it to people doing TV commercials and movies and stuff like that, you know, like if your publisher's just going to not do much and take a cut of it, well, it's kind of pointless. You know, it's nice to have a publisher that's actually going to get around you, and maybe even also they might have, for example, if you're a producer, they might have a hot singer who they're publishing. They might be able to organise to get you to work together with them. Hey, say, look, we've got this hot singer. They need some songs. You can, you know, how about you kind of get together with them and stuff as well.
Writing camp sort of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of good to it's good to have a publisher that's going to put a bit of effort in as well. But just like I said, just look at who they're working with, and you know, most publishing houses have got a bit of a pedigree you can look at and see what they're doing.
Cool. Yeah, great. Thanks for that. I think that's definitely a kind of like a unknown territory for so many people.
Yeah, it is tricky. It is tricky. There are a few sharks in the biz.
You mentioned you're building your new studio. So if you had unlimited funds and the ultimate studio, what would be like your top 5 things that you'd 100% have in that studio?
Oh, look, I'd love to have a console, an actual mixing console again. I'd love to have a board with with the moving faders and stuff. If I had an unlimited budget, it'd be something like an SSL Duality, which I've worked on before. They're an amazing console. The sound of those things is it's just quick. You're just quick. When you go, I need to turn the volume up, you just go and push it up on the fader. You've got your EQs and stuff. You're just dialing stuff in. And the best thing about those is you can actually move 2 things at once, which you can't do with a mouse. You know, the tactile feedback. If I had a big studio, I would love to have an SSL decent sized console, or maybe one of the small format Neve consoles, which you can get, which have got a really good tone and stuff to them. That would be a big tick for me. I'd probably also want
synths.
Good collection of microphones, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I reckon a good collection, maybe 4 or 5 good, couple of older vintage Neumanns and a couple of the newer large diaphragm mics. I love good microphones. And then synthesizers. I mean, there's probably tons of stuff, but the new, like that Moog, I think it's the Moog 1 or whatever it's called. Yeah. Polyphonic. That looks just.
Hey, they're on discount at Store DJ. They're only $16,000, not $20,000. So if you've got the spare money.
Yeah, listen, that sounds great. I also don't want to get banged in the face with a frying pan by my wife for buying it. So I'll just. I think if I buy anything, I'll be looking at some of the Behringer bits actually, probably. But
yeah, I've just got the TD3, that little 303 synth.
They're good. Their stuff's good.
Actually, I got 2 of them.
I'm going to play on top of it. The other thing I'd love to get would be if I could find one, would be a Yamaha CS80, the original CS80 synth, which is the one that a lot of the French guys use. Daft Punk used one a lot. Ralph Falcon and what's the guy's name? Oh God. Anyway, there's quite a few of the French producers use them. They are just unbelievable. If you can find one in decent condition, though, you'll pay like 30, 35, 40K, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Jeez.
Apparently Behringer's not doing a knockoff, but remains to be seen what it's going to look like when it comes out.
I like the way the Behringer stuff sounds. They're just so light.
The Yamaha CS80 is kind of like the godfather of polyphonic analog synths. It was used to great effect by Vangelis. So Vangelis, a lot of Vangelis's soundtrack from what's the film I'm thinking of? With Harrison Ford in it. Anyway, that one somebody will know. It'll come to me in a minute. A lot of the 70s stuff that Vangelis did, he did on the CS80. They are just next level. Blade Runner is the movie I'm thinking of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're next level. But
great film.
Hella expensive. So hopefully Behringer's going to bring one out. It won't cost too much, and it'll be great. We'll wait and see.
And what about can you think of one plugin under $100 that's kind of a must-have or a good buy for producers on a budget?
The ones that I love, one of the little ones that I use stacks, man, is the Kazrog True Iron, and you can buy it as a combo package. I think it's about $70 or $80. You get it with a thing called Synth Warmer as well. And the True Iron is just this nifty little. It adds the sound of Transformers to anything, and it's just this. It's kind of hard to explain what it's doing. It adds this kind of third dimension almost to the sounds that you're putting through it. So the Kazrog would be.
I'm going to get that one.
Yeah. And also, look, the Acoustica stuff, they have regularly stuff that's under $100 that comes on special. The Diamond Lift master channel thing is just kind of handy little EQ compressor thing that's just got a sound of all of its own. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the EQ side of things or compressors that are. The one that I want to get from Acoustica, which I haven't seen for under $100, but it might come up eventually, is the L-Ray compressor. It's the Greg Wells tube compressor thing that he's got. It's like one of a kind RCA compressor thing that I think it might be the only one in the world. And the Acoustica knockoff, which is called the L-Ray, it comes up for under $100 normally on the Black Friday sale. So I haven't got it yet. I'm waiting for that to come up because I'm going to buy it straight away. But that would be also a good purchase. But the Kazrog True Iron is a great little cheap plug-in that just gives you a bunch of different transformers to add to channels when you're mixing. Great for bass, vocals. You know, if you want to get a bit of grit in your vocals and stuff, it's very subtle, but it's good.
Beautiful. All right, cool. Well, geez, I just looked at the time. We've already gone 40 minutes in. It feels like it's been 5 minutes. That's a good sign. It's just at this point, did anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask? And if you do, you can either throw it into the chat or you can unmute yourself. Anyone at all?
That Mobin I see there?
With his, we can't hear you. You're on mute. Oh, he's on the phone. I know someone wanted to know a bit more about the Xfer situation and just more details about that whole deal and anything you can tell us.
Yes, what happened there?
Axwell. Yeah, well, we first met him when he came to Melbourne. He came to Melbourne in 2000 and I'm going to say 5, before he was kind of famous. It was around the time when he had Watch the Sunrise and kind of nobody, he was known in Melbourne, but he came, got off the plane. We took him out to dinner, me and Grant, Smiley, and we did a gig with him and we became friends with him. And then a year later, we were in Europe. We went to Stockholm just to hang out with him in his studio. And he looked after me like big time. He signed a lot of our records. He did In the Air. He did In My Mind. He signed Been a Long Time with us. And yeah, he's just a really cool guy, Axe. He's kind of in that group of the Swedish crew. He's the most relaxed, chill, humble, just wants to make great records. He's good fun to be with. He's because the other guys, Steve and Seb, those blokes, they're crazy, flat out crazy, those two. But Axe is great. And within my mind, so I'd done a show in Mykonos in 2011, and I'd met the Phoenix Paul guys. I kind of knew them from around Melbourne, but we were actually hanging out in Mykonos. And I said to them, hey, listen, we should do a record sometime soon. And they said, yeah, look, we've got this track we're not sure what to do with. Maybe we can, collaborate on it. So they sent it over, and it was the song basics were there. The vocal was there. Georgie K's vocal was on it. So I basically just started again with the construction of the track. And at the time, I knew what Axwell was playing, so I kind of put the Axwell hat on and said, right, what's Axe? Because I thought I want to pitch this to Axe. What's he going to want to hear in this record? He's going to want a big drop. He's going to want a nice melodic piano line. He's going to want a main riff. So then we kind of just we almost used a sort of a blueprint, I guess, and just said, well, these are the elements that I think we need. And then we played with it for like 2 weeks, mucking around with the arrangement. We weren't happy with the arrangement. We finally got it to a point, and I had this back in the old studio. I used to have one of those air horn in a can, the can air horn things you can get, right? So I said to the guys, we were working on the track, and I said, I'm going to keep this air horn can just under the studio bench. And I said, when I think it's right, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to let it rip. So we were working on the track for a couple of weeks. And then one day it was playing and it hit the drop and I grabbed the can and went, it's done. So I sent it to Axwell and didn't hear anything from Axe for like 2 weeks. So I was talking to Josh on the phone one day and he goes like, what's going on? I said, man, Axwell, I don't think he likes it. He hasn't said anything. And then literally it was about 10 minutes later, I'm checking my emails and there's an email from Axwell and he's had to listen to it. And all he said was, love it, want it. And so I went, oh, okay. What do I do next? There was no information about what he needed next. So then a day later, he sent me. He said, look, we got to do this. We got to change this. I want to mess with the arrangement a little bit. And we got it to a point. We got it as good as we could. But the mix down that we had done, he didn't feel like it was quite punchy enough. He wanted to do a slightly more bigger, I guess, version. So he took it and just did a few final tweaks on the mix down. He took about 15 seconds out off the arrangement and just made a few little adjustments. But he made it sound a bit more punchy for the kind of dance floors that he plays on. And then, he played it at the Madison. I think the first time he played it was at the Madison Square Garden show. And the next day we were looking at the YouTube feed and all the comments section. And every second comment was like, what's that In My Mind record? And they were like, maybe it's Dirty South's new track. Maybe it's, we don't know whose record is it. Maybe it's Axwell's new thing, And nobody could. And I said to the guys, Aidan and Josh from Phoenix Paul, I said, guys, this record's going to be big. I said, I can just tell by the comments already. He's played it once and and it was great for a brief period of time. And then pretty soon everybody was playing it and it just kind of got boring and annoying. I remember one of my mates was at one of the festivals in the US was like, dude, every single DJ's played this record today. I'm like, yeah, that's great. But it's like, surely there's other records they could play as well, Like I'm loving it, but it was a bit full on,
I think I've heard about 45 different mashup versions of it by now.
Oh, yeah. That was the thing because we did one and everybody had their own mashup version, Is
there still a connection there to Axwell and Axtone? And
I don't know. I don't speak to him as much as I used to. I have spoken to him a couple of times. I'm working with Marcus Santoro, a young guy.
Yeah,
he speaks.
He's releasing a bit with him, man.
Yeah, they've got a big release coming out in a few weeks' time. I don't speak to him as much. He's gone back to Stockholm. He's doing the more commercial thing these days. Obviously, the Swedish House Mafia was. I guess they're going to do some more shows when this coronavirus thing's over. But I do speak to the label. I still speak to the guys at Axtone a bit about releases, and they come to me with ideas for re-releasing tracks we've done in the past occasionally. So we might do some re-releases, some more kind of deep house versions of some of our older tracks or something. We're not
cool.
Not saying it won't happen, but I don't. The problem with Axwell is he's a bloody superstar. He's too busy. He doesn't have a lot of time to just talk to the minions anymore. So.
We've got one question, but I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it. Is there a deal that you wish you'd never signed? I'm not sure if this is a management deal or a record deal, but
no, it's not. I had a hard time when we were signed to Sony in the early days as TV Rock. That was difficult because they wanted commercial hits, and I didn't really know how to do that. I tried doing a couple of commercial records, didn't work. So but that's really the only thing. So, I mean, I don't think I've never been ripped off. Fortunately, I've had good management and people around me that have prevented that from happening. I think the In My Mind, Dinoro was a good example. We could have been ripped off, but we weren't. The management stepped in and got it over the line and did the right thing. So, no, there's not really been anything that's been terrible. I guess you've just got to watch who you're working with, and just the worst thing that's happened, and it hasn't happened to me, but some of my friends have left tracks with people, and then they've been released without them knowing. They've been released, and then they go, "Hang on a minute, I got a cut of that record. What's going on there?" That's happened a few times. So you've got to be just mindful of making sure that the people you're working with are honest and true, and you've got, and that you've got something in writing. So as I said, when you're working with somebody, you know what you're getting and you're not going to get stitched up.
I've got a question, if that's cool.
Absolutely.
Hey!
How are we, Ivan? How are we, legends? Good to see you all. Just before, you were talking about Flaunt It and how you kind of ended up playing some gigs that were almost like, you felt like you were in the wrong spot, like mainstream pop-wise kind of thing, a bit.
Yeah.
Not really like kind of that interesting in terms of what music you want to play. How'd you cope with that? Like,
okay, so I've got a story.
And that kind of stuff? Or?
I've got a story, actually. There is a story I can tell you. We played at this place down in Tasmania, at a place in the middle of nowhere called Gough. And so the guy down there decided he was going to do a rock and rave was the idea. So he was going to have bands on all day from like midday until about 9 o'clock. And then he was going to have DJs playing until 3 or 4 in the morning. But the local council said, no, you can't play that late. You can go till 10 o'clock. So he decided he would just book us. So they had bands playing all day. And these bands were like blues and heavy metal. And the guys in front of us were all bikies. And we're like, okay, this is... So we get to the gig. And they're like, oh, this is the room you're staying in. And it was almost like imagine a caravan, but actually as a motel sort of room, broken TV, we were like this. The beds were like, I'm sure there was critters in the bed. You know, we're like, no way, I'm not staying here. So I said I remember I was saying to the driver, when we finish at 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, you are to be below the console in the car with the engine running because we are getting out of here. So we get up on stage, and as soon as we get on stage, they started throwing stuff at the stage. Right? But these guys, but then what happened was it turned out that all these bikers and all these heavies, they brought all their kids with them, and they wanted to see us. So 5 minutes later, the stage fills up at the front with all these kids. But while we're playing, there were thongs getting thrown and dim sims flying past. And
what the fuck?
And you know what? At this point, that's a gig I'll take right now.
And we came up. We got off the stage, and it was one of the guys there was a guy called Joe Camilleri, an Australian rock legend. Joe Camilleri's band had played just before us, and one of the bass player I'm standing there, and I go, man, they were chucking dim sims at us, and he goes, mate, I got hit in the face with a full can of beer. He said I was trying to play bass, and somebody hit him in the face with a full can of beer. It was like, this was the roughest gig you have ever seen. So that's the kind of place we were getting booked just for a brief period of time. But then, not long after that, we were overseas mostly. So I did a lot of gigs we played in places like Russia and Brazil and all kinds of weird and wonderful spots. But some of the rough gigs in Australia were interesting, to say the least.
Did you end up playing like just pop shit that everyone wanted to hear, or are you just happy playing?
No,
whatever.
We did a lot of mashups. We mashed up, so we'd play a track that had a vocal that everyone knew, but a track that we wanted to play. It was sort of a balancing act, really.
Yeah, like house shit underneath or whatever.
Yeah, you hopefully kind of rise above that. Yeah. Hopefully you get to a point
so you're
where you don't have to do all of those sorts of shows. But it was still good fun. It was good fun to play in Gough, a good crew and stuff down there. But it was a pretty rowdy crowd, that's for sure.
You should play at Parliament House again.
You're not drinking.
Cool.
Yeah, we played a gig at Parliament House. We played a gig at, oh man, where did we play else? We did we did a lot of those places like the snow resorts. We played a lot of the Ministry of Sound shows. We played in like Jindabyne a lot. And
Jindy.
They were good gigs. Yeah, they were good fun. Really good fun. But sometimes some of the places you play out in the middle of nowhere, a lot of the places don't get a lot of acts. So when you turn up, they're just really excited to have someone that's bothered to come to their town, So they're like, oh, wow, this is great, The boys are in town. So it was a bit of a party. The hard part is not going to the after party, not having too many drinks, not staying out until 7 a.m. and then trying to get on a plane 2 hours later.
Yeah.
That takes true talent.
That's actually, if I can give everybody listening a bit of advice, just watch the party, because I've got a lot of friends who have lost their marbles and struggled because of drugs and alcohol and other things. You've got to have a line somewhere that you don't cross.
100%. I think right now is a great time for a lot of people to connect with themselves and start to look after their health. I know that we're doing a lot of different videos on stuff like mental health. We've got a couple of different Facebook groups. So if anyone wants to reach out, or maybe I'll chuck them in the comments. But you definitely have to have that balance. And I think now is a good time for people that maybe didn't have much balance before, that they can put a bit more effort into their health and all that sort of thing. Reverse some of the damage done.
Yeah, it's you've got to look. It's a good time at the moment to be working on music and doing stuff, but you obviously got to earn money as well. So, I mean, this is weird. I don't know what the marketplace is going to look like in the future. I think it's going to weed out a lot of people, the ones that are not really serious. Maybe some of the people who are trading more on their looks than their actual ability, that might help to remove some of them from the game, perhaps. I don't know.
We're working for free right now, right? So everything we're doing now, every time we spend, we're not earning any money. It's just like we're doing this because we love to do it. And I think a lot of people forget that. And I do see a few people online, criticizing one another and just being nasty and trying to pull people down at the moment. And it's just like, you realize we're doing this for nothing but love. And you're trying to pull us down. Like, it's kind of sad to see, but I think you are right in that respect for sure. The people that do it for the love, but they'll always do it and keep doing it. That's
part of the game. If you start having success, people will chop you down, especially in Australia. It's just the way it is. You just got to be prepared to. I mean, people can only upset you if you let them. And you really, if you start succeeding, you've got to have a thick skin. You just got to keep moving forward and do what you believe is you need to do. That's the most important thing, is self-belief, and say, I don't give a shit what people think of this record. It's a good record. I know it is. I love it. It's what I would want to play. It's what I would want to listen to. So you keep moving in that direction. The only time that I've ever doubted myself is when I've been working on projects that I feel like are not really me, and I'm not sure how I can add to the project. And I've actually said to people, listen, you know, I'm not getting anywhere with this track. It's not my sound. And I've said no to stuff, you know. But if you believe in yourself, and it really doesn't matter what anyone thinks, you know, you'll eventually attract the right people around you. And look for people who are a positive influence in your life too. I've worked with a lot of people who are difficult to work with, and having positive people around you will help to elevate you much further in this business for sure.
Mobin, you got a question?
Can you actually hear me at all?
Yes.
Yeah,
I had to convert to my Logic. How are you? Long time.
Good.
Mate, you've got the best looking studio out of anyone on this Zoom. Gee, it looks nice.
I've actually got, the weird thing is, Ivan, I asked about your setup. See that over there? Can you see that?
Oh, yes.
LI08 and the Neve compressor.
Yeah, good.
And the Atom S3As.
Yeah, I've got the S3As there.
And the NS10s.
Oh, you guys got the same head.
We've got the identical studio and we didn't know it.
Yeah,
obviously much better to be a doctor right now than DJ.
Well, there's a bit of risk involved in being a doctor right now, mate.
Yeah, and I've got to say, Mobin, probably on behalf of everybody here, my wife's a nurse. She's working at St. Vincent's, and she's going to be close to the front line in the coming weeks too. I probably should say to you, mate, it's good to see that guys like yourself are sticking your neck out and helping out everybody at the moment. It's a difficult time for all of us, so congratulations.
The nurses deserve it more than we do. The nurses are the main thing about this virus. I know we don't want to talk about it, blah blah blah, but just very quickly, just so a summary, because I hope that because you guys know me and you sort of know me as a dude, and I'm not just like, I'm still an old bloke, but not an old bloke that's telling you what to do. I'm seeing this shit live. I've been in the clubs. I've partied with a lot of you guys and hung out and drunk, etc. You know, the key is that it's contact for more than 15 minutes. So if you don't hang out with someone for a short period of time, the chances of you getting it is very low. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you're just passing someone droplets, you've got to be pretty unlucky unless they sneeze all over you, and that's what the masks are for. If someone just splatters all over you. But if you're not in the same room for more than 15 minutes with someone, you're highly unlikely to get it. But these poor nurses, they're sitting there next to one that's positive for 8-hour to 10-hour shifts.
Yeah,
you know
it's tricky.
And a lot
hopefully
of them
hopefully we can get out of this in the not too distant future and get back to going to clubs and promoting our music. I mean, it's difficult at the moment just to find a place where you can get some exposure with no clubs open. It's, you know, I've got tracks that I'm working on at the moment that I'm hanging on to. I'm telling people, let's hang on to it until things kind of come out the other side, so we've got somewhere to play this stuff. Because if you're not getting radio and you're not picking up a lot of streaming revenue, then it's almost pointless putting stuff out right now.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be an ocean that's going to come out all at once, Ivan, when the clubs come out, and it'll just be way too much? Because another perspective is perhaps you're knocking out these tunes, and then retrospectively, you can look at the last 6 to 12 months and go, wait a minute, there is back-to-back anthems of tunes that haven't been played out. So there will be sets of incredible music that have come out that you've filtered already over this long period.
Yeah, look, there could be. I mean, it's hard to. One of the questions I do get asked from people is how do I kind of get started? How do I get some exposure for what I'm doing? And it is difficult. And I suppose it's all the more difficult at the moment. But I guess we do have one advantage. A lot of people have got a lot of free time to spend, first of all, working on music, and second of all, shouting about it around the right places and trying to create a bit of interest in what they're doing. It is difficult. It's hard to work out. I mean, I'm working with a lot of major labels and on projects that I know are going to go to radio and things like that. And it's like, okay, I'm not so concerned about that. But a lot of the clubbier stuff, you're kind of relying on your friends to get around you and give you some exposure and stuff. It is difficult. But you do still have, I mean, you know, Pete Tong is still doing his thing. A lot of stuff's getting played on radio throughout Europe and stuff. I mean, obviously, not so much in Australia, but the right records are getting through. There had been a lot of club tracks that have made it to radio this year. So if you get the right record, I suppose it's all about coming up with that right track, isn't it, really? Which is the same as it ever is. A
lot of people that were releasing and had schedules with me, they're like, you know, we want to push it back. And I said, we're not pushing it back. Just make me another record.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, one of the good things about today is, as you well know, you don't need a lot of money to release music. Back in the old days, you know, you had to go to a studio and get it mixed professionally, and then you had to cut vinyl and get it all mastered on a vinyl at a vinyl mastering plant and all that. It was a lot of money, you know. Like a release would cost $5,000 or $6,000 just to get it off the ground. It's not like that anymore. So I suppose more content is better. It's just about figuring out how to best sell it and get it the right exposure, and hopefully get it on some playlists on Spotify where people can actually hear it.
I have found with Spotify having kind of regular content, pitching it right, it kind of like it has a bit of a snowball effect. Our recent release, which is 4.5 minutes long, and we didn't use any playlist push or anything, is getting 3,000 plays a day, and that's just from one of the editorials. Whereas some other stuff we've really put a lot of effort into is getting good plays, but there was that original groundwork. And I think a bit of consistency works well with kind of Spotify. It's what I'm finding anyway.
I think you're right, Christian. Like, it slowly picks up. If you're putting out music every 4 weeks or so, I'm starting to notice as well, but it is a tricky one. I think they want to see that you're kind of moving a little. It's a hard one getting off the ground, but just time and just keep doing it because you love it, not because you
especially with the CEO yelling at us all. I don't know. I just saw an article online. I didn't even read it. I only saw the heading.
Look, you know, and trying to hit the bullseye, trying to have success in this record is like trying to hit a bullseye on a dartboard. What you got to do is throw a lot of darts, you know, and put music out there and put stuff out. You never know when you're going to come up with the next. I mean, when we put out Flaunt It, I remember that record. We took it to record companies, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's a bit too kind of dark, and we're not sure. It's a bit menacing, and no, we don't think it's going to work." We played it at a couple of our shows, and it went really well. And we were like, "Okay, what do we do here?" And it just happened that Grant Smiley was working at Nova, and he played it to one of the guys at Nova and said, "What do you think of this?" And the guy goes, "Look, we'll play it once. We'll put it on in the middle of the afternoon." They used to do a thing called a crash test, and I just play it once. And they said, "We'll see what happens." So they played it once, and the phones lit up, and everyone's like, "What's this record?" So then the guys told Grant the next day. He goes, "Man, we played it, and the phones lit up, so we'll play it again." Then 3 days later, they put it on the nighttime show. Back in those days, they used to have, I think it was the Nova 19s or something. So they played it, and it started at 19, and then it was 17, and 13, and 12. And by the time it got to, I think, about number 4 on their chart, Sony, we'd given it to Sony, and one of our mates at Sony, who was the A&R, he'd gone to them, and they said, no, it's too clubby for us. And he went back when it was, I think it was number 4 or something, and he goes, "Dude, we've got to sign this." He went to Dennis Hanlon, the top guy at Sony, who's the king of the Australian music industry just about. He said, "Man, we have to sign this record. It's going to be a massive hit." And they finally signed it. And as soon as they signed it, it went to day plays on both Nova and right across the Austereo network. And it was a hit overnight. But it took a long time, man. We had to work it and work it and work it. And we were basically knocking on doors and harassing people. "Can you play it for us at your club gigs?" And
it won ARIA awards, right?
Yeah, it was one of the biggest. It was the biggest selling Australian record of the year that year.
Were you in a better position for that deal signing with Sony because it was already kind of gaining popularity? Like, you know, were you able to get like a better deal or
yeah, we were. My manager is more of a radio commercial kind of person. He's not a kind of guy who hangs out at festivals and parties with everyone. He's an older guy, and he was like, "You know what? I'm going to go straight to the right people." So initially, when we wanted him to manage us, he wouldn't manage us. As soon as we had some interest from Sony, he said, "I'll manage you," and we were like, "Okay." We had spoken to 2 or 3 other labels. They'd said no. Then 2 of them came back to us after we'd signed the Sony deal. They came back to us and said, "Oh, have you signed that record yet? We might be actually interested now." And we're like, "Sorry, boys, it's gone," you know. But
oh my God.
It helped us with our publishing deal. The publishing deal that we got was with a reasonable amount of money. But, yeah, I mean, we were lucky because we hadn't signed any publishing deals. We hadn't done anything. And so when the publishing guys came in, my manager he basically got the 3 biggest publishing companies in the country to whoever gives me the most money gets the deal sort of thing. So, I guess that's how it worked. But anyway, he got us a reasonable deal for it. But yeah, sometimes you just got to push. Sometimes you just have to, if you've got a record you believe in, you know it's going to go places, you've just got to push and harass and do whatever you can.
I think every time I go to the gym or went to the gym, I would see Flaunt It play on the TV at the gym. Shout outs to Shawnee.
That is a horrible. Well, we'll see. We did the film clip before we had a deal, so I think the film clip cost us about $175.
That's awesome.
It was a terrible film clip. We had a light. I think we had Frank Catella from One Love and those guys. Grant got a few friends that were models, and we had a synth playing in the background and a few shitty lights, and it was terrible. But you know what? It's all we needed. It worked.
Actually, I think one of the chicks from that film clip was at the last Reaver where Grant played.
Could have been. He was a bit of a pin-up that in those days, Grant. spent a lot of time at the gym, so he always had a few girls chasing him. Quite funny it was. But yeah, look, it's proof that you don't need, you know, I know people always talk about social media presence and all that kind of stuff. We didn't need any of that back in those days. We just played the record clubs, and if the kids screamed, we put it out, you know, like that's how it worked.
And you never drank or partied too much? It's just that you've just never really been into
don't worry, I drank. I drank
oh, you did?
Yeah. I was good at booze for a while there. But no, look, I just didn't want to have to get on a plane 3 hours later if I was trashed, you know. If you had a day off, you'd say, all right, we'll stay out till 5 and have a few drinks. But I always had a limit. I just didn't want to be partying my ass off, because I always wanted to get back in the studio a couple of days later and get to work. You know, a lot of people who party all weekend can't get in the studio till Thursday, and then they're back DJing again on Friday. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be back making more beats. So I just, you know, I would selectively party, if you like.
I like it.
Look after myself, you know. But that's why I'm still standing here. There's a lot of guys who are my age who are not because of it.
Yeah.
Party too hard, and unfortunately, mental illness, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, suicide. There is an unfortunate side to this business that sometimes that crops up with people, and you got to look after yourself.
Especially for I find like young DJs that need to attend 400 parties a weekend just to get a gig or something. You know, they're really stretching themselves a bit too thin because they're just trying to like get one spot, and they have to attend every gig and basically party from which you can do in Melbourne, Thursday to Tuesday.
Yeah. No, there was a lot of that going on in the early days even. You know, a lot of my mates would go out on a Saturday night and come home Tuesday, but I couldn't do it.
You can do it when you're 20, though. You're made of rubber, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, maybe. It's just that the problem is, like, you know, back in the old days, there was a lot of that. We used to, some of the guys I used to work with in the studio used to smoke a lot of weed. And I used to find that I had lots of ideas, but I couldn't work out which were the good ones. So we'd work on tracks, and then the next day I'd come back and go, what the hell is this? You know?
Like, it sounded great the night before, but the next morning it's like, whoa, what is this?
No, I'll just fall asleep in the studio if I'm smoking any weed. I don't know how people do it.
It's a challenge. It's good for you.
Miguel Campbell, he just, like, when we were in the studio, he just nonstop. And he's great. Like, I don't know how he does it, but he could just smoke anyone under the table, I reckon.
It helps with the creativity, but it's not very good with your objectivity. It helps you to come up with lots of ideas. Stick them all down and then come back the next day when you're straight and figure out which ones are good. But yeah, it's
got a,
you know, you've got to be able to get your work done.
Got a comment from Callum here, which is, what are some good music and workflow tips for people that don't really know maybe music theory?
Okay, I'll give you a couple of bits of some golden advice. First thing, I've worked with a lot of people, big names. I won't name drop anyone right now, but I've worked with a lot of people. The ones that the guys that I've worked with, and some girls, but the guys mostly that I've worked with that get results, they're always quick, and they're usually quick with. Most of them don't use any special plugins. They don't have any kind of, you know, Axwell. First time I saw Axwell, he was using the Logic standard built-in plugins. You know, I thought he was on an AMEC mixing console with $100,000 worth of outboard gear. And I remember thinking at the time, what am I missing here? Why I've got the same tool set and I can't get the results? So I started looking at okay, what's the trick? Is it the equipment? It's not, it's the workflow. And the tip for workflow is preparation, and then preparation, and then preparation. And preparation, by that I mean set your computer up so that you've got a collection of the sounds that you need. So, for example, bass drums. You actually posted the Jay Dilla bass drum set.
Yeah.
Right? I already had that. That's a great collection. If you're doing garage and late night disco kind of stuff, perfect drums for that. Collect sounds and then sift through them and figure out what are the sounds that are good that you need and use those. So that's the first thing. Then channel strips, whatever DAW you're using. I use Logic. I also know how to use Ableton. I've got a lot of friends of mine who work on FL Studio or whatever. Creating channel strips. Spend a bit of time. There are tons and tons of video, like mixing with the masters videos and the guys from Pure Mix. You can watch their videos and learn and create some channel strips. So maybe a bass channel strip and a drum channel strip and a vocals channel strip and set up stuff so that your computer is ready. So when you start working on a track, when you start writing stuff, that you've got access to the tools that you need and you can get things done quickly. Then when it comes to musical ideas, here's a really good trick for you. There's plenty of them. One of my favorite ones, I've downloaded I got a folder it's probably got 10 gigabytes of acapellas in it, right? I just dig up an acapella that I like, chuck an acapella up on the Logic channel, get it in time, roughly, and then I put music with it. And then I throw once I've got some music and beats that I like, then I throw the acapella out and start going from there. So I use the acapella as a start point. I'll pick an acapella that's kind of something that I really like, and I start with that, and then I trash the acapella and keep going with the track. That's one great way.
That's good for writer's block as well, I guess.
Yes. There's also, there's a lot of chord apps. There's one I've got on my phone, actually. I think it's called, damn it, I haven't got my phone here. I can't show it to you, but it's a little chord app, and it just gives you, so you pick a key, and it just gives you a few chords.
Unison MIDI chord pack, is that the one, Ivan?
Yeah, no, it's called, I'm going to find it. I'll find it, let you know. We can post it in the comments section. It's just a little app. You go, I'm working in A minor. See, I've never learned keys, but I know how to play some basic blues riffs. But I know how I've played so much music over the years and done so many songs that I can almost imagine chords. I can write stuff that I can't actually play. So I am what they call a compositional player. I can compose music that is way beyond what I could ever play in an actual piece. But I do it by just following a few stock standard kind of chords, and this little chord app is one of them. There's a few things you can get for your desktop where you just basically hit the chords. There's also that Xfer guy. He's got that MIDI chord plugin. It's called the
Steve Duda.
Yeah, Steve Duda's thing. It's called the Sitalifu or something. It's a MIDI. Say it?
I was saying syphilis, but no, keep going.
Yeah, it's
one
like
of the other things you can't catch that right now.
No,
it's the same moment you want to check him out. You got to say
it's a chord. It's a chord thing that he developed, I think, in conjunction with Joel Deadmau5, and they came up with this. And you basically just put a chord in it, and it gives you a whole bunch of different intonations that you can use. The other thing which I do a lot is actually work with a musician. I get somebody in who plays guitar and get them to jam out some ideas. You know, like if you know someone who plays a bit of keys, throw them over some beats and say, look, and then send them a track reference and get them to come back to you with some chords and just give them a quick 5% of the record for their trouble, whatever like that. You know, there's plenty of ways to do that sort of stuff. But the most important thing is preparation. Having channel strips, spend a couple of days just downloading samples. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of sample packs. There's a couple of really good sample packs that people have put up that have all the old drum machine samples from the older 70s and 80s drum machines. They are fantastic if you want to get that gritty sort of old school analog sound, old 909s and 808s and all the old rolling
What's
machines.
that, Ivan? What are they called? Do you know?
I'll find the link to them. There's just look up free analog drum machine samples, and I guarantee you'll find them. There were a couple of kits. Somebody posted them up a few years ago as a free download, and they'll be on the internet. They'll be on the internet somewhere. If not, I'll find them.
Ableton comes with a bunch of the 505s and 707s
Yeah,
and 6.
I use that stuff all the time because I just go, you know what, I need a hi-hat sound. There's also
samples from Mars have really good drum ones.
I bought another one the other day, a little thing that works with Contact, which is the sampler built into Native Instruments, and it's called it's like Shake, Rattle, and Roll or something, and it's just tambourines, shakers, and sticks, and it's just a programmable. Like if you need a tambourine loop or a shaker pattern, it does it instantly. It's like a plugin that works within the Contact sampler thing, and there's tons of stuff like that. I think it cost me $20 or something for it, you know. So, but yeah, if you create, like on my hard drive, I've got a sounds and samples folder which has got sounds and samples in it going right across the 30 years of my career, and they're all in folders, so I know where to find. If I need house drums, if I need something for techno, if I need something for a deep house or soul record or whatever, they're all categorized so I can find things really quickly. And when I'm working with people, I find, because the hardest thing is when I'm working on my own. When I'm on my own, I tend to kind of fiddle-fart around too much. When I'm working with somebody and they're paying for my time, I work fast. I know I can find stuff quickly and get something going quickly. That's the most important. That is the biggest thing to making good records, is getting your workflow to a point where you're fast and furious. And you can, because what happens is when you're listening to something repeating for a long time while you're trying to find a bass drum or something, you start to get bored and you start to feel like, oh, I've heard this is not as good as it used to be. When you are able to do things quickly, then you will stay kind of interested in a record throughout the process. And then once you get to that 70, 80%, put it aside and leave it for a couple of days and come back to it. Don't try to finish it in one hit. Just put it aside, get stuck into something else, and then come back to it a couple of days later and finish it off. I find that the way I work, 90% of my records get done in about 20% of the time. And then that final 10% takes sometimes days of just adjusting and balancing vocals and fixing. And this is before I even mix it, you know?
Yeah. And what do you, and well, actually we're chatting before we had everyone in the group, but just listening to your mixes and masters on different platforms like your Apple AirPods or your iPhone or your laptop speakers.
Yeah, well, I suppose as far as like what I guess what is a good sort of toolkit and system for getting started and what to listen on. If you can't afford to treat your room properly, then just get some good headphones. The
What
ones
have you
you're
got?
wearing, I got the LCD-Xs, the same as yours.
X. No, I got the LCD too, so they're just the model under.
Okay, so the LCD-Xs, there's the cheaper LCD Audi's ones or Audi, whatever they're called. There's also a brand called Hi-Fi Man that make HE 400Is, which are apparently quite good for mixing on. The Sennheiser HD 600s and HD 650s are very good. The HD 600s are great because they don't feel too heavy on your head. These ones are quite weighty. So
yeah, they do.
But if you can't afford to set up your room correctly, then don't try to do any critical stuff. I mean, obviously, if you're working with someone else in the room, you're going to need speakers. But don't try to do the critical stuff if you haven't got a good room. Don't try to do it on speakers. And then if you've got a room like a decent sounding room, then yeah, sure. But then a good set of monitors and also listening to your demos on as many systems and things that you know. Listen to it on your laptop speakers. Listen to it in your car. Listen to it on your soundbar where your TV is or something. You'll find, you know, if you're sitting there listening to something on your TV all the time, watching TV shows and listening to music and various things, you'll actually find it's a pretty good reference. If you go over there and put your track on it, you'll hear straight, oh, it's got too much bass, or I can't hear the vocals properly, or, you know, that sort of stuff. You'll be amazed how much you can get, even laptop speakers. I listen to stuff on my laptop speakers sometimes and I can tell if the vocals are loud enough or not. You know, it's only a crappy reference, but it gives me that, it might give me one little bit of information that I couldn't get elsewhere.
Amazing.
Do you find, Ivan, you're basically, it's a continuous mix down over all these different speakers? That's what I do, and it sounds like what you do. And even the earbuds, the Apple earbuds, you listen on your Yamahas, you listen on your S3As, you put it on mono. A lot of people also have to remember there's phase cancellation problems as well that you have to look into, and don't make your mix too wide. I think you need a few sessions. I think you need a few sessions, Ivan.
Well, the thing is, what you need more than anything is it's that old saying about because I get asked, people say, well, what's, you know, what are EQ settings and various things for mixing sounds, and how do you get something to sound good? And it's a bit like that, you know, that the old saying about you can give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, he'll eat forever. It's the same thing with the best thing I can tell people is watch as many of those mixing with the masters type videos, information videos where people give you different techniques. I've been watching one recently by a guy. It's Kush Audio. Have you seen the Kush Audio? So he does Kush Audio. There's a guy, he does these. It's Late Night with Kush Audio or something, and he has all these really crazy ways of mixing things, mixing in mono, mixing with just one speaker on, all this banana head stuff. But it's great. It gives you some really cool ideas on how to actually improve what you're doing. The most important thing.
We'll chuck a link to that down there as well.
Yeah, it's Kush Audio. It's just look him up on YouTube, and I think it's called Kush After Hours. And he does lots of cool kind of tricks. Also the Pensado, Dave Pensado at Pensado's place, tons of stuff. The most important thing is referencing, listening to tracks that you know that are good, so you know what yours needs to sound like. Because you can't, it's hard to say, well, how do I mix this bass drum? It's like, well, if you don't know what a good one sounds like, then it's difficult. So you really need to kind of get as many references. I have a folder that I keep on my desktop, which has references. And I always have the sequencer page on my screen, and then just below it, I'll have a QuickTime with just a reference of a track that, and sometimes it's the client's recommended. This is a track that I like, so I want you to get mine in that sort of pocket, and I'll just keep it there and use that as a reference right from the start. So I know how loud they want things, where do they want the bass drum to sit, how up front do they want the vocals, that kind of stuff. And I'm still
Awesome.
learning too. Like as far as my mixing goes, yeah, I'm pretty good, but I've also not that good. I've got a long way to go. You know, like I'm always trying to improve. I never stop trying to learn how to do something better than what I'm doing already. And how to, most importantly, how to improve my workflow so I can do things quicker.
Amazing. Awesome. Has anyone, that's great, man. Yeah. Thanks so much for jumping on. Has anyone got any more questions? I mean, we could probably keep talking for the rest of the night if we wanted to.
Well, we go a bit longer if you'd like. Is there anything else you want to ask me about?
Yeah. Anyone out there got any questions?
Hey, Ivan.
Yes.
Your metric halo giving you shit. That's why I was so distressed tonight. My metric halo was shitting itself. And
I had a metric halo for a while. I don't know what I did.
You don't have it anymore?
No, I've got a UAD Apollo now.
Oh, okay.
My main
Yeah,
interface.
the actual, and I mean, you can probably find some pretty good stuff secondhand. Interestingly, I can't explain why, but when you're using the brain of a UAD, a card, or an external card, and it's got software with it, and you're using its plugin, its own plugin rather than Logic or VSTs or AUs, it's mind-blowingly different. So
You just save a lot of CPU?
Yeah, well, my sound card's got its own plugins with it, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is those plugins are being used by its own brain. It's not using the CPU of your computer, and it's got its own algorithms. So it's like its own door. So the track I sent you recently, I forgot that I had the plugins, and I thought I'd put it through Softube EQ compression and brought it back into my project, and it completely changed the song. And I think the UAD, I mean, not everyone can, it's pretty crazy, isn't it, Ivan? How much are they worth nowadays?
The UAD stuff's, I think it's kind of getting a bit superseded now anyway. I reckon the Acoustica audio plugins are doing things with audio. I mean, the Acoustica, for mixing, the Acoustica has this third dimension that not a lot of plugins get.
It's all convolution. They record it from the actual
there's several
hardware.
Yeah, there's several. I'm just going to go into my plugins folder just quickly so I can see what's in there and tell you about it. There's several other ones that are kind of close. There's the Softube stuff a lot of people like, but the Acoustica, the problem with the Acoustica audio stuff for me is there's a bit of lag time between clicking on something and actually having it do the thing that it's doing. So you've got to kind of learn how to work with all that because
it's a bit
when you hit a button, it's sort of like
that latency
and then it kind of clicks in. Okay, so Fabfilter. I just bought the Fabfilter. I bought the pack, which included, they're on sale at the moment, 25% off. So I use the Fabfilter stuff a lot. The Fabfilter Pro Q and the Fabfilter Pro MB for doing vocals. It's a trick that some of the pros use. I know Tony Maserati uses it a lot on his vocal tricks for pop records. For just kind of compressing certain frequency ranges around vocals and stuff to get them. Because one of the biggest problems I get is boxy vocals recorded in a small space where they just don't breathe, and you've got to try and get a bit of life into them. And I find that using the things like the Fabfilter Pro MB allows me to just, rather than EQing all the boxiness out, which can sometimes leave the sound a bit too kind of scooped, if you like. The way that the Pro MB works is it only reduces the boxiness when it's there, so it kind of just. It's like any multi-band compressor. So the Fabfilter Pro Q EQ
it's the best.
Is probably the best simple EQ of anything. You just literally just point and click and drag frequencies up and down, and it's just a great way to actually get a I
don't know if you guys have seen also on Twitch, like we were chatting about it before, but Disclosure are just putting up constructions of all of their tracks. There's a YouTube channel called Musical Streams that is posting them as well. And he's just going through every plugin he has as well. He's got the UAD stuff. And he, in his recent one, he had his top 5 plugins and the Pro Q3 was in there.
Yeah, it's got to be there. It's so easy to use. I'm looking down the list here. There's also the Dangerous Music Backs EQ, which is really Dangerous. Is my speaker controller and stuff made by these guys, Dangerous Music. They make some really cool stuff. The Backs EQ is a great plugin, and I'm it's just there's a lot of little nifty EQs and stuff that you can find that are free. There's one called a Lufticus, which is a free EQ you can grab online. The other thing I like is the I've got the Plugin Alliance. Plugin Alliance boot. It's
Yep.
Plugin Alliance. I've got the Mega Bundle, which I pay about $30 a month for.
Yeah.
And it gives me like
they're on sale right now as well, actually.
Yeah, it gives me 100 plugins, and it's just it's amazing.
I saw an email from them today. That whole I think it's like $129 for the year or something. It's like half price right now.
Yep. Yeah, it's really good. I like the sound of a lot of the, as I said, the acoustic stuff. I'm just looking down the list of my plugins here to see what else is in here that's worth giving a shout out to.
I just thought you were looking deeply into my eyes.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, don't tell the wife. Where are we? Yeah, that's all. The Synalxis filter is one that I've been using for about 20 years. Oh yeah, the UAD stuff's quite good. The problem with the UAD stuff is when I take this laptop, which I work on down the street and work in someone else's studio, I don't have the UAD box with me, so I tend to kind of use the UAD stuff on final mixdowns, but not so much on the production of tracks.
Yeah.
Hey Ivan, I was going to ask you, are you harmonic mixing? So the Pro Q2, which is quite useful, harmonic mix. So for example, F is 80. That's why EDM's 80 hertz, and then it goes off obviously in octaves to octaves to octaves. So you add frequencies that are actually in the octaves and in key in the actual spectrum, which will give you a nice tone. Or you could use harmonic frequencies. So for example, if you're in D, you can do, you don't do E, you'd add say an F or something like that. That is a harmonic frequency, but never add frequencies that are sort of D and say D sharp.
Isn't what
that makes sense?
Yes.
To an extent, right?
I do that all the time. So I do my bass drums in the key of the record. I do the snare drums on the fifth. I do the toms on thirds. And I try, and I've got a little chart. It's just a keys and frequencies chart. So you can find one online. So there's quite a few of them around. That's a great thing to mention. Mobin, I forgot about that. I don't do it on everything, but it is good. Depending on, look, it really depends on the sound that you've got in front of you. But I do use the EQ a lot on bass, so I'll actually pick the frequency of the dominant note of the bass on the record and boost that with a fairly wide Q, usually to give me a good amount of round tone that is sitting fairly close. Obviously, if you've got a lot of bass notes moving around, you've got to sometimes squash things to keep everything from sort of, you don't want the main note to be jumping where the rest isn't. So you've got to watch that. But yeah, what Mobin said is a great idea. It's a really good thing to do when you're mixing, to just try and add a bit of the frequency of the sound. While I'm talking about that, actually adding frequencies, there is a bunch of plugins. They make, one of them is called the Bark of Dog, and it's called Gatey Wadey, and I'm trying to think of the name of the company. It'll come to me in a minute. I'll find them. They have a bunch of plugins. So the Bark of Dog is like you put a bass drum through it, and it just adds a subtone to it. That is, I saw Mick Gazowski, who did the mixing on all the Jamiroquai stuff. He did Daft Punk's last album, and he was talking about how he uses it. It's probably not so much on big dance kick drums, but if you're using those more kind of drum machine type kicks, and especially drum samples from old records, like some of those Jay Dilla samples that may not necessarily have a lot of subtone on them.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up. Wait a second. Let me find the name of the company.
If anyone wants those Jay Dilla samples as well, I've got a Facebook group. If you guys aren't in it, most of you probably are in the Hot Sunday Records Artist Hub, but I posted it in there because, they are free ones that I found online, and basically, Disclosure used them as well. So I was like, oh shit, I better send them into the group. So yeah, if you're not in that group, just message me and I'll add you in. I'll put a link to the group in the description on the YouTube channel as well.
I'm just typing in the name of it. It's Boz. I think I'll put it in the chat window here. Boz. It's bozdlabs.com. Any of their plugins, there's 2 or 3 of them. The ones they just, their stuff's really cool. It's just, it just adds there's 2 or 3 different plugins, but they're really handy little tools for adding subtones. And one of them, I forget which one, actually has the key. So you type the key of the record in, and then it just adds the sub that is in that key. So it does the work for you. It's really good. It's a great way to work.
That existed.
Yeah, no. I'm going to get a bunch of stuff, and I'll actually give you, Christian. You can put it up on the page. I'm just looking here.
That'd be great. I'll get this one up on YouTube probably tomorrow or the next day. I'm moving to the country tomorrow, getting out of stage 4. See you later.
Okay, so they've got one called the Sasquatch kick machine, which is the more full-on kind of version. And it adds, it'll add a subtone in whatever key, and you can put basses and stuff through it. You can do all sorts of bits and pieces because you can choose to put, for example, if you've got a track in the key of A, you can add A0 or A1, so it'll actually add different octaves depending on what you're trying to achieve. If you're doing like more of that bass music and stuff, where you want sort of some upper harmonic kind of bass line things, you can do that. Really handy stuff. So Boz Digital Labs I've put the link in there. Click on that and have a look, everyone. There is also another plugin I wanted to mention while I was here. Magic AB, which I use a bit, which is like a way of, you can load reference tracks into it and put it on your master channel, and then you can just switch between them. So you can listen to it and then go back to your track sort of thing.
Yeah.
There is also there's a thing called the MIA Labs Pi and Phi. They're both really cool plugins. Now, and there's also a compressor called the Magic Death Eye compressor, which is unbelievably amazing sounding thing. I'm just looking here to see the Pi and Phi. So I can I'm going to post a link to the page. So they're basically, the Pi and Phi are actually EQs, and they're fantastic. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. I'll put the link up on the page in a second. Hang on a second.
Yes, sweet.
I'll put it in the back window. Yeah, so as I said before, it's all really just down to coming up with stuff that's going to allow you to work quickly, and it's the preparation is the most important thing, and having all the right tools around you. You know, like what Mobin was saying a minute ago about adding the right notes into your EQs and stuff like that. Yeah, all that sort of stuff helps to getting a good mix. But if you spend a lot of time watching those tutorials on Dave Penzato's page, and there's another one called Mixing with the Masters, which is one you can actually pay. It's like $300 a year, and you get literally like hours and hours of completely dissected tracks, how they recorded the guitars, how they recorded the drums, how they mixed them and stuff. You might find a lot of it will be rock related stuff, but there'll be great ideas in amongst it on how to improve the sound of what you're doing. So
yeah, amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll put all links to all that.
Dave Pensato's place is good. They have a lot of interviews and stuff, people talking about the gear they're using. Yeah, there's so much stuff online.
All we have is time. We're all going to be amazing mixing and mastering engineers by the end of this lock-in, which may never end.
Yeah, or do what a lot of people do and pay for someone to mix it.
Yeah,
pay somebody who can, like Klaus or myself, or there's plenty of guys around that'll do a good job for you for a good price. If you've got something that you think is going to be, that you're not quite satisfied with, I'd probably a third of my work these days is mixing on tracks for people.
Yeah. There's some people that just like to be, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People just like to be creative. They like to make music. I don't think you need to make, mix, master your own records to have respect from other producers or something like that. Like, I think it's all good. Sometimes
you just need a second pair of ears too. Like I've done some of my own mastering in the past, but I always prefer to go to a mastering engineer. I'd love using someone like Klaus, who's just really good at what he does. He's a fantastic guy, easy to work with, and he'll come back to you and say, "Hey, look, go back and just change the bass drum a little bit, and then give it back to me, and I'll get it better." Like guys like that are just gold in this industry, because he will take your record up another 20%, and doesn't charge very much. And he's got a good collection of both in the box and proper analog gear that he works with. So I've got a mate of mine down in Melbourne who's got $100,000 mastering suite I can use from time to time. That sort of stuff is, if it costs me a couple $100 to use it to get a bit of extra pizzazz on my record, I'll do it. I'll do it every day of the week to get that little bit extra,
Awesome. 100%. Beautiful. Thanks so much for joining us, mate. Has anyone got any other questions, or we're happy to leave it at that? I'll listen back throughout this whole thing and put every single link to everything we have in the YouTube description. So if you guys are getting patient, I'll get that up before the end of the week. If not, if there's anything specific you've forgotten you want us to just chuck you a link, just message us and we'll do it now. But if there are no other questions, anyone? I saw someone's mic flick on. off. Don't be afraid. Ask away. All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate your time. Absolutely.
No worries. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
So much good info in there, but 5 or 6 new plugins to check out.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff there. And if you want to ask more questions, everybody knows where my page is. Just drop in and ask a question anytime you feel like you want to send me a message, whatever. I'm always happy to help.
Yeah, and if you need something mixed, I can vouch for it. It's absolutely amazing work.
Beautiful. All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it all.
No worries. Thanks, mate. Have a good one. We'll chat soon.
Thanks.
Hey, guys. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. Make sure you do hit subscribe and turn the notifications on, so you're going to get notified every time we upload a video. We're doing a minimum of 2 a week, sometimes 3, covering all bases in the industry, from mental health, production tips, interviewing, DJs. We're going to go deep, 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 covering all bases, get you all the information you need. Hopefully some of it is useful and there's not too much of me talking shit.